Well, great. Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name is Carla Leandri Ryder, and I'm the Executive Director of the Rufus Porter Museum of Art and Ingenuity located in Bridgeton, Maine. Welcome to our first virtual lecture of 2023. Tonight's presentation is Lost in Place, Saving Wall Murals, presented by David Ottinger. Before we begin, we ask that you please have your microphone muted. There will be a Q&A session at the end where you can simply type your question into the chat box. We also want to make you aware that this presentation is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube page within the next couple of days. So anyone who is unable to attend today will be able to go ahead and watch it at their leisure. For those of you not familiar with the Rufus Porter Museum, we were founded in 2005, and our mission is to celebrate the life, times, and legacy of a remarkable 19th century New Englander through preservation and promotion of creativity and invention. Rufus Porter is well recognized in the folk art world for his wall murals. However, he was much more than just an artist. He was a musician, a teacher, inventor, and founder of Scientific American magazine, which is still in publication today. Our museum campus is home to two historic houses, the circa 1840 John and Maria Webb House and the circa 1790 Nathan Church House, which is one of Bridgeton's oldest surviving buildings and the original headquarters of the museum. We offer permanent and special exhibits, events, classes, lectures, and other educational opportunities that further our mission. This year, the museum will be breaking ground for a third building, which will house the James Norton murals, which will be discussed during tonight's presentation, as well as provide for much needed exhibit, classroom, and community meeting space. We are a seasonal museum. We're open from mid-June to mid-October, but we're also available by appointment. And to learn more about us, please visit our website at rufusportermuseum.org, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're unable to visit us in person, we do offer an online tour on our website, as well as virtual access to our museum collection. So without further ado, I'd like to present our speaker for the evening, David Ottinger. David is a preservation contractor with 38 years of experience moving early painted walls and complete historic structures throughout New England. His presentation will focus on the process of moving walls and features pictures of the signed 1840 Jonathan Poor walls from the Norton House in East Baldwin, Maine, soon to be reinstalled in the new addition to the Rufus Porter Museum. Welcome, David.
Hi. How's that? All right. Make sure I got this whole thing from the beginning. All right, is this good? Yeah, my name is David Ottinger. I have been moving walls for almost 40 years. I'm a board member of the Center for Painted Wall Preservation. This presentation is we'll talk generally about murals and also and why we move them and how we move them. I guess.
Secret stash documents a week before the midterms. And the first person she calls is the librarian who got Trump in trouble. And the librarian suddenly has no comment. The librarian who loves Barack.
We're fortunate that President Obama, in his
Okay, I guess I got it. Sorry about that. So those are some Rufus Porter murals that we moved. Actually, that's going down Lexington Avenue in New York City. We had taken them out in the early 80s, and they were sold at the Winter Antique Show in New York, and we installed them. Painted walls are unusual as far as art goes. They are reliant on their environment more than most most art, which is more portable. They're dependent on the buildings that they're in and for their survival, generally speaking. These are John Avery walls up in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. There was a tornado in that house. It was dilapidated before, but there was a tornado in that house, and you get a sense of how endangered these things can be. Those are probably later John Avery paintings with some additions. So the building is crucial in their survival generally until when I get involved. This is another example at Gilmore House up in Norwich Walk, Maine. There was a fire there, and the building was open for quite a while. The paintings were removed, and on the right you see that they've been conserved, cleaned, and that's actually the same view. What's kind of fascinating about these paintings is that they're signed by this fellow Quincy, and apparently he taught Rufus Porter. So you get a sense of how fragile it was and what an interesting survival. Basically, the walls are done with distemper paint. It's a water-based paint, and you can see how the plaster, the paint and the plasters are on lath. This is so-called accordion lath. They split it and drew it apart, and the lime plaster keys into the substrate. Usually, this accordion lath are nailed onto vertical studs. This is an example in Southborough, Mass. We took apart an old tavern there. It was to be demolished, so we dismantled it. And here you see us taking apart the walls in sections. That's upstairs was an old ballroom. There was actually two fireplaces and a removable wall in the middle. It had actually all the rooms except for the kitchen, and there was a tap room in the front, had plum-colored walls were stenciled. So I find it interesting how some of these places just had tremendous numbers of walls originally, and you get a sense of how pervasive they were at one time. There we are finishing up. That actually was where the tap room was. Found an old bar in the corner there, and you see us craning the sections onto a trailer. So this paint, this distemper paint, is sort of fascinating. Rufus Porter talks about it in his book Curious Arts. He talks about dissolving half a pound of glue in water and mixing it with pigments. So it's a water-based paint. That's actually the Norton house in the upstairs bedroom, in the corner of the bed chamber, and they had actually added on to the back of the to that building. So originally it was a story and a half cape, and they added on to the back. And when they did, the structure was somewhat compromised. We had to jack up the building and you know, to remove the walls and resupport it. You see a crack above the doorway. Doorways tend to be places where cracks occur, but you know, and that's the structure of the building. This back wall, there was where they added, there was the valley in the roof, and water washed in for years. You can see how it dripped down the wall. That's really, the rest of the walls were just absolutely staggering condition and wonderful condition. But I find it sort of fascinating. You get a sense of how simple that wall was. And they probably had a bed there. I don't know. There's some thought that people are starting to look at, in terms of conservation, projection mapping, and you can actually project the image of the correct paint onto that. So that's a possibility for something like that. This plaster that these walls are, the paint is on, is a traditional lime plaster with a binder, usually pig hair actually. The image on the left is modern gypsum plaster adjacent to lime plaster. This was a place we were working on, and the water had been leaking in, and there's mold and mildew on the gypsum, but not on the lime. It's very resilient, and it's actually not conducive to mold and mildew. It kills it. So it's a kind of a remarkable material. And when we repair buildings, we can replicate it. We work the plaster, the lime plaster, the traditional plaster in, and it sort of bonds. So it's an effective way to repair. Again, back to the Norton house, these cracks are telegraphing, I suppose, are expressing the structure, frequently the structure in the building, and the failings in the structure of the building. But you get a sense of how wonderful those walls are with the waterfall and the scene over the fireplace. They're the best Rufus Porter. I mean, Jonathan Porter walls in existence, as far as I know. There's that crack again. When we took it out, we had to stabilize the back of the wall to remove it, and there's been some more stabilization since then. Here's another example about this, dealing with this structure. This is a place that Linda Lefko and I worked on, and the paintings on the right had a lot of cracks. We were able to fill the cracks and add some paint. That's on the right. So on the left is, but they elected not to deal with the structure. There was a doorway and it was a hall, and they never stabilized the structure. So that's not a very that's not a solution that's going to last. It's going to, same thing will happen again. Another issue that with these walls are the heating and cooling systems. These walls, I moved some of these walls, but this house had been heated for many years, and in the last 4 or 5 years, they had stopped heating it, and the walls had really deteriorated fairly rapidly. We at Center for Painted Wall Preservation, we take a lot of photographs, and we have this archive, and we can actually fix in time what walls look like and how they change. But it's important to recognize how the heating and the moisture in buildings can really have an effect on the walls. Another issue is the vapor barriers and insulation. That's a situation where apparently they put some insulation in the wall, and you see that the moisture is the walls are permeable, vapor permeable, and so moisture is moving through them. So it becomes really important that the environment that they're in is not humid and is evenly heated. Another thing that happens with these walls are what I'm going to call improper preservation techniques. This is, again, John Avery walls. You see that they added shellac over the distemper paint, and it's bubbling and flaking. The John Avery walls in general tend to be fairly prone to the paint coming off. Here's an example of a house where people were preserving the walls with good intentions. They actually put a plywood on the walls and then wallpaper over it. Unfortunately, the glue in apparently the glue in the plywood reacted with the paint. So people trying to do a good job, it didn't. And then another issue that happens is these are the same walls you saw in the first image, the Rufus Porter walls. This is nearby in the same town, and this is somebody restoring them, in quotes. And that's somebody, if they're not painted with attention to what was there, you get a dramatically different effect. Why these walls become available, which is basically what I do. This is the first place I ever moved. It was in 1982. Those are John Avery walls, and you actually have one of them in your collection. I'll show you a picture of it later, but it was up these stairs, and the owners had, I heard about them. They had bought the house and they were not interested in saving the walls. I made an arrangement where we replaced the walls, we replastered and redid the woodwork, and I took them out. So that was the first experience I had with them. John Avery's interesting because he tends to depict identifiable, subjects, buildings frequently. That's the Bunker Hill Monument in Boston. I believe it's built in 1842. They had the idea around for a while, but there's on the side wall there was the Egyptian gateway at the Mount Auburn Cemetery, another identifiable building and a date which is around the same time. I learned how to do this. I started by reading about how they moved the William Price walls at Winterthur from the Carroll House, and that was done in 1957. And they were solidifying them and using the glue. So that's how I got started on it. Another reason why the buildings become available is a change of ownership. This is kind of an interesting story. This is the East area. These paintings were in the East area, New Hampshire, Adams Female Academy. It was an early, it was a sort of a progressive education in the early 19th century. Actually, Mary Lyons, who went on to found Mount Holyoke, taught there. And the fellow who bought this building had heard that there were walls upstairs in this academy building. And so he went in and he started pulling the plaster. There was a new layer of plaster and lath, and he pulled it off, and there were these walls that had been sealed in there since about 1860, and they're very vibrant. It was interesting. There was sort of discreet schoolgirl graffiti on them, and they're kind of fascinating. But when he went to sell the building, the new owners had no interest in the walls, so these were sold separately. We got hired to go in and take the walls out. They were insulating, so we were taking the walls out as complete units between the windows, and then we replaced the outside. The walls. These walls frequently don't find, there's kind of a long saga frequently with these walls, and this is no exception to that. The fellow who purchased them from, when the house was sold and purchased them separately and we moved them, had intended on using them. Subsequently, he tried to sell them a variety of ways, but as it turned out, he was able to donate them to the Old Stonehouse Museum in Brownington, Vermont, also an academy building. If you ever get a chance to go up there, not only are the walls there, and they're fascinating, but the Academy building, it's a huge granite building built by Alexander Twilight, who was African-American, who had, again, progressive ideas about education. And this ended up being a good place for them. They're displayed as panels there. There's some furniture, there's some paint decorated furniture, the same period. Again, even frequently people change their idea of how they want to use the buildings. This is in Wyoming. New York, Linda got a call, and these people were basically opening up their house. They didn't want the smaller rooms, and these walls are there. That's apparently the founder of Wyoming, New York, lording over his empire there. And the Historical Society heard about this and contacted Linda at the Center for Painted Wall Preservation. We were able to talk them through moving them. They had added some structural support on the back, and they actually moved them in this case on a ramp truck. So they laid them down horizontally on a ramp truck, and it seemed to work fine. There they are, reinstalled. In this case, they had a conservator who added a layer of, I guess it was rice paper or some kind of a fabric it's reversible, it's removable, but that's when they look like when they were rehung. But the primary reason that these walls become available is demolition. It's been going on a long time, and this is back in the 40s, and then this in Woburn, Mass, that happened a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now. So the Prescott Tavern, it's a wonderful old tavern, and it's, as you can see it, but it was dismantled. This is probably my favorite image. This is the inside of the Prescott Tavern, and it shows the walls in context. You can see the paint decorated mantelpiece surrounding the mantle and the surround for the overmantel, and the wall. You can see that the baseboards and the floor are also paint decorated. So you get a sense of the context and what's lost frequently and when these things are moved. In that case, that was the overmantel. It's thought to be the Capitol building in Washington, and the rising sun. So you can see it over there. It was that we had installed that. It was sold as a panel that they were taken out when it was dismantled and went to a museum in Peterborough, New Hampshire, and subsequently they were auctioned off in New York as in various groups. So there's the overmantel. Well, one fascinating thing I find about that is apparently reading about it, and I've kind of figured it out, the way the light came into the room, it was basically shining onto this this image of the White House and the sun. So that, again, the context is so important. It's lost when they're moved. That's the panel you saw there. Was auctioned off and was remounted on honeycomb aluminum, was installed at the Marriott Hotel, and now it's at the MFA in Boston. But this is sort of a fragment of a fragment. The context that you saw in that postcard is really gone. I mean, it's not, you really don't have a sense of what the wall's meaning was in terms of the connection to the place it was. And then this happened 3 years ago now, the Shaker Glen Inn. I heard about that, and there was in the Jean Littman book, she talks about these being signed. Jean Littman was a pioneer writer and investigator of walls in general and Rufus Porter walls, and did a lot of wonderful work of things that are gone now. And these are underneath some other walls, and we kind of knew they were there, and when the place was demolished, these were taken out. Unfortunately, you can see that I had a conservative look at them, and they had painted over them. They had been shellacked and inpainted and all that, so that was kind of lost. And we never found the signature. There's supposed to be a signature there. We haven't found it. They do look like Rufus Porter. They do look like Rufus Porter walls. As far as them coming available outright sale and removal, it's fairly rare within my experience. I know of a few examples, but the issue is the removal and the repair. It's fairly expensive and time consuming, and very rarely does it make sense to do that. How? So as I've been talking about, these paintings are the plaster on the lath. So what I do is I take them out in complete sections. That's actually the Norton House again. And you can see there's a 1.5-story cape. It was in East Baldwin. So the process, the first thing we do is we need to get to the back of them, open them up. And in situations where there's outside walls, we have to take the outside of the building off, which is what occurred in this case. And they were on the second floor primarily, so we had to build staging. And actually, we had the staging on one side, we moved it over to the other. This was just opening them up to access them. And then once we access them, there's sort of, it turns out there's a sequence usually to get them to remove them. But frequently we need to figure out the structure of the building is integral to the structure of the building of the walls, and we need to support the building, the frame of the building as we're removing the walls. So we need to figure out how that's happening, and we need to jack and support. And in some cases where things have collapsed, actually, you know, lift the building. That's what happened in this case in that corner. So that we open them up, and then we see. So that's again. That's that over mantle. There was a fireplace behind it. That's in the other room. You can see how there actually was a stovepipe going through that in the bottom there. It's sort of remarkable that it survived. You also get a sense of how wonderful these walls are. And you can see some of the supports we have, you know, to be able to start taking them out. Once we open them up and we start doing the support, we clean the back of them, and I've been gluing them with rabbit skin glue, which is actually it should be a hygroscopic reversible hide glue. We've been working it in with brushes and a couple of layers. I've heard people talk about putting huge amounts on and you know, like with sponges and stuff, but we put it in with the where we can get through the keys and the plaster. Where there's splits in the lath, and then those are keys, and we try to bind it there. I like it because it seems to be reversible. Actually, my son's been restoring violins, and what I find remarkable is you can heat, and with a little bit of water you can open up the violins and get in there and discover that people have been in there 3 or 4 times before. So it's a reversible process. And if you forget to wash your brushes, you just soak them in water. So once we've glued them up, then we establish a support. We're transferring the support from the building to the walls. On the right, you can see that we're using horizontal probably 2x8s, holding the walls together, and we're getting ready to start cutting them out. On the left, that was an entire center of a house I took out, and that's the grid we had. We were able to crane the middle of the house out, and I've started using a fair amount of aluminum also because of the weight. So then once these things are supported and we've carefully cut them out, we remove them as complete wall sections with our new support. And there's frequently a sequence, which really has nothing to do with the way they were constructed. It's more how to get them out so that it almost becomes apparent as you start opening up and working on the house that, you know, you have to get, say, the outside out before the middle. But that's us. I guess we transfer the staging over, and that's us cleaning out the gable end wall, which will be reinstalled at the Rufus Porter Museum. We did do some crating. In this case, you can see we had some crating. As far as transportation, I've had good luck pretty much trying to move them with people, taking the weight off and ollies. We do it mostly by hand. I mean, I realize it's a little deceptive with the crane, but we try to move them by hand, and that seems to be it seems to put less stress on them. And then this again is Norton. So we put them in trucks. We used an air ride truck in that case, and we craned them onto a place out behind the birches, and that's the Norton walls going into to the cellar there. And they're stored. That's always the problem with these large walls. They're stored in the cellar there. You can see they're labeled, and the humidity's been being monitored. So they've been additionally conserved, and I guess that's the anticipation is to move them to the Rufus Porter Museum this summer or fall, which is absolutely wonderful. Okay, I wanted to say a little bit about the walls in general, as far as they have a very dismaying history. frequently they're taken out, and actually not frequently they're taken. Frequently when they're taken out, they don't find ultimate homes. There seem to be a limited number of customers, and then I think people are, despite the fact that they have this wonderful paint, people are uncomfortable. They think the people think they're vulnerable. There's a sort of this history of abysmal auction records. That wall is in your collection at the Roof Museum, at the top of the stairway, that room in Gilmington that I took down. It's John Avery wall. I thought this was sort of an interesting installation because the woman actually she was a collector, but she was a landscape architect, and they installed it as another window. So I thought, it's sort of a window into the 19th century, and trees there, and then trees outside. But in that case, those walls had 6 owners, and the final owner is the Rufus Porter Museum. I want to talk a little bit about one of our success stories as far as this goes. This was a house up in Westbrook, Maine, the Zebulon Trickey house. That house had been sold for, I guess they put a gas station in there, and actually they dismantled the house, and I don't know if they reinstalled it, but I kind of in the 11th hour, there didn't seem to be anybody coming forward interested in the walls, and I took them out. There you see again with this, we're supporting them, and we've removed one wall. You can kind of see that the sills there are kind of not very good. So you've got that kind of how crucial the structure of the buildings are for these things. When we were taking them out, a fellow stopped by. I guess he was a conservator, and they had this blue paint all around, he kind of looked at it and he said, I think that's latex, and I think there's a solvent for it. And he came back the next day, and there was, they were actually fairly cleanable. So they, again, through a couple of different dealers, had them, and they were offered for sale in a variety of ways. And they ended up being installed on Nantucket, Mass. That's where they were. I helped out with that. You can see how that blue cleaned up fairly well. And that seemed to be an end to the story, but we got a call. The Center for Painted Wall Preservation got a call. Linda got a call, and the builder out there on Nantucket was kind of concerned. They were doing a complete gut rehab. Is a large house there, and he noticed on our website that the walls were pictured actually, and they were basically headed for the dumpster. They were going to take them out and redo the room. So I went out there and was able to take them out the way we, helped put them in. We had an attorney and somebody who had connections with the dealer, and we were able to place them at the Huntington Museum. The Huntington Library Art Museum, Botanical Gardens in San Marino. So we were able to find a good end for them. There's a few kind of interesting things as far as moving walls. Again, you can see we stored them when we got them out. There was kind of a time constraint. So we took them out and we stored them in the guest house there. But you can see how we're taking the weight off of the walls and moving them on dollies. We use those cross pieces there. And I've actually had good luck transporting them horizontally. In that case, we created a series, I guess I've called them trays, where we were able to slide the different walls in on top of each other, sort of like toast. Now, ironically, the fellow who had taken them out to Nantucket was the same truck driver who took them out to California. So that's my talk. Thanks for listening, and I hope you learned something, and if you have any questions.
If you have any questions, you can put them right in the chat box and I can read them out to everybody. Well, here, I have a question.
Sure.
So, I'm fascinated by all those photos of the walls being removed. And then, of course, there's this big gaping hole. What happens to the building that's actually not going to be coming down? What happens after that? Just putting up a traditional, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, in the case of Norton, the Norton house where your walls came from, that was all replaced. We took out, actually, we ended up taking the floors, the doors, everything as far as the interior goes with us, and that as part of the arrangement, the walls were rebuilt, replaced and rebuilt. Actually, we jacked it up so it was maybe a little straighter. The staircase was rebuilt, the doors were replaced. So in that case, that's what happens. That again, that's somewhat unusual. Usually these walls become available because of demolition.
Right. Oh, hold on. There's some stuff coming in here. Let's see. I have someone who said, you said often these projects are uneconomic. How do these projects get paid for?
Well, it varies. I mean, I frequently, I've been interested in these for a long time, so I have taken them out. Sometimes there's somebody involved. The issue at the Academy building in East Derry, there was somebody who had purchased them, so they paid for it in that case. There's a variety of ways that it gets paid for. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
And then I have a similar question. What is done to the wall when you want to remove the holes from windows or shelves or the fireplace?
I'm not sure I understand. You mean if you mean when you reinstall them, you want to remove the holes, or once they're removed, or
Yes.
Okay, so you have a wall and you want to, okay, so you could, there's a variety of things that I've seen. You could put a window in with nothing behind it. In the case of fireplaces, they actually have fireboards that, they were painted at the time. They were painted frequently. There's examples of Jonathan Port fireboards, and they would fit them into the fireplaces. So that's a possibility. You can put the fireplaces back. It really depends on the installation. Some of the installations are as rooms, and some of the most of them are as panels, actually. I mean, what you're doing at Rufus Porter Museum is you're putting them back together in context, which I think is the ideal situation. You have the floors, you have the doors. I'm a little intrigued to find out if there's actually decoration or what the original paint was, because these are frequently the artists who did the walls did more, and they would have at very least chosen colors that they thought were complementary, but often they decorated them, the floors and the walls as you saw in that postcard.
And then we have just a comment. It's amazing people don't understand the significance of these murals.
Well, I completely agree. I mean, I find it, there's people demolishing and tearing these things out constantly, and it really puzzles me. I mean, I think that in some ways this is the best of American folk art in the 19th century, and it was certainly expressing the way people, this new independence that people had found, the way they wanted to decorate their homes. And so it had a meaning then to the people, and in theory it should have a meaning now. As far as art goes, compared to most folk art that you get, wall is absolutely staggering in the amount of art you get. It puzzles me, actually. I wish there were. I think that's what the Rufus Porter Museum is helping do, is make people understand what treasures these are and how wonderful they are.
And then we have, hi there, I'm wondering what is the ideal humidity level and temperature for long-term storage?
I'm not certain. I guess I'm not certain that there's an ideal. I think that you could look at museum guidelines. I do know that if it's changed, in other words, We took some walls out of a place where I had a humidity, I was tracking the humidity and it was 98%. So we very, very, very slowly dried them out. So I think the single biggest problem is dramatic shifts in humidity. I'm not an expert on it. I think a museum consultant could tell you the ideal humidity. I suspect it's in the 40s or 30s%. But that it does point to the fact, I think, how important the environment they're stored in is. That I think that if you get the paint is remarkably resilient in some ways. That's kind of one of the things about distemper paint. But it also, there are situations where it just flakes right off the walls if you have these dramatic swings in temperature and these heating systems and dramatic swings in humidity. The two together actually kind of conspire.
Next we have, hi, David, from Joe and Elsie Brown's daughter. And then in parentheses, Deerfield Parade. I'm assuming that means something to you. Where does one look for walls that are for sale? What are the costs?
Good question. I'm hoping I'm hoping walls are kept where they, this is kind of part of my goal here is to try to discourage people from moving them and to point out the tragedy of them being moved. There aren't that many out there for sale right now, and the cost varies. There are some that have sold for substantial amounts of money, but some of them, those ones up in those ones that got moved up to the Academy building in Vermont, they tried selling them at a group shop. They tried auctioning them off. There was nobody interested in them, so there's not. It's a very strange market. I don't know if that's helping or not. In Deerfield, there are some interesting walls.
Next question is, can you describe how the aluminum is used?
The aluminum. All right. So what I'm doing is the building, the frame of the building, the post and beam frame of the building is holding the studs, these vertical framing members. And so what I need to do is transfer the support. So I go across, so I go horizontally across to these vertical studs that are the original wall. And the aluminum, I've just started, these things become fairly heavy. They're in the 1,000+ range if they're fairly large, and the aluminum is just taking off the weight. So that would be used horizontally, typically on the back, and attached to the studs to keep the relationship between all the studs from shifting. That one where we did the grid, we actually had the aluminum. We had standard lumber 2x stock going horizontally and vertically, and we used aluminum to create a grid. I'm trying to hold them rigid the way they are. In terms of reinstallation, sometimes people want to shift them around. That's kind of a whole nother thing. But my approach has been basically to hold them intact the way they are when I remove them. And, somebody can go back through and shift them if they want. But
so the next question kind of ties into, you kind of answered part of it, I think. What do the walls typically weigh? What has been your largest? Heavy set, question mark?
Okay, definitely the largest is when we took the whole middle of that house out. That was almost 18 by, I think it was about 14. And the weight, they're surprised. They kind of weigh 600 to 1,500 pounds. It's tough for people to move them. Usually you need 6 or 8 on a reasonably good size wall or a crane.
And then how do you conclusively determine the artist when there is no signature?
Oh boy, that's a fascinating question. In the case of the ones that at Rufus Porter Museum, there's a signature right on it and a date. So there you have that. In terms of Rufus Porter, the way I would think about looking at it is that I would look for something that's signed. In the case of Rufus Porter, there seem to be 3 that are signed. That one that we couldn't find the signature on, and then there's 2 others, and you know, and they're convincing. The 2 signatures there are convincing signatures. So then you start looking for paintings that are very similar, connected in a lot of ways. So you would see those walls at the Academy building, trees and a lot of things are very similar to the signed walls. But then you get into these kind of other areas, and say the walls from the Goyette Museum, you know, at the MFA, those don't share a lot of the characteristics of the signed walls. So now what? So, you know, the thought is that there's some anonymous artists out there. So that's the way I would look at it. John Avery, unfortunately, nothing has been signed. He's known to have been active in the area and painting. And there's this group that's sort of, you know, thought to be him. There seems to be some later ones and some earlier ones, and there seems to be changes in style. But I'm not aware of anybody signing them. So that's kind of, it's problematic. And I think there's a lot of room for more research. I mean, the Center for Painted Wall Preservation, we're kind of working on that and looking at that. Some walls have been ascribed to artists. There's been some of the brushstroke, there's some good research going on in some of the brushstroke painters. They've actually found signatures and names. So that's the way I would look at it. Is you really need to have a signed work and then find characteristics that are similar.
Next we have, when you say there are lots of walls in Deerfield, do you mean in the museum or private homes, or is it a Deerfield in a different state?
Oh boy. I was talking about Deerfield, New Hampshire, and I think there's 7 or 8 examples. For some reason, we actually, Center for Painted Wall Preservation did a tour in Deerfield a couple 3 years ago, before COVID. And for some reason, there are a lot of walls around that area. I don't know exactly. And there seem to be kind of pockets up in Maine where the same thing happens. It seems to have something to do with these progressive, kind of democratically, I mean, there's some thought, there's an interest, well, at any rate, yeah, there seem to be groups of them in areas.
Anybody else have a question?
Answered all your questions.
Can I speak? Can I speak?
Sure, oh. Sure, go for it.
We should tell people about Linda and Jane's book, the latest research on Rufus Porter walls and other artists who seem to have been part of a school of artists who were doing this type of work. And I can't remember the title exactly, but Jane will know if she's there, or Julie knows, or David, you know.
Yeah, they sell it at the Rufus Porter Museum, right? You have that book there.
Excuse me?
Yeah, Linda Lefko and Jane Radcliffe's book. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh yes. Did I tuned in a little late? Was it mentioned earlier?
No, it wasn't.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's a great book, and that's, I think, starting to sort through the walls that are there and possible artists and characteristics that are shared between them. You have Carly, you have the bookstore, right?
Oh yeah, yes we do.
Yeah, so definitely, if you're interested in this, that's a great place to start.
Anybody else? Oh, what is the title of the book and authors? I can send out a message to everybody later with the pertinent information.
Folk art. It starts with folk art. I've just gone blank.
Folk art murals of the Rufus Porter School. Landscape murals.
Right.
In New England landscape murals, 1820 to 1840.
There you get it from Jane herself.
Yeah,
Julie, I want to say Julie Lindbergh was very, in terms of moving the Norton walls, she was just wonderful. She was very supportive and helped us out and kind of kept our spirits. That was until recently the significantly most difficult project I'd been involved in, and she was absolutely wonderful. And in helping us with that. And actually, a lot of the photographs are hers. So.
I was going to say that the book has a chapter on motifs that were used primarily by Jonathan Poor, who is the painter of the Rufus Porter murals here of the museum, and another chapter on the motifs used by Rufus Porter. And so once you learn which of those, some of those were used by both of them, so you have to learn what they are. But once you do, you can pretty readily recognize the artists. Jonathan Poor did a lot more folky things than Rufus Porter was very classic. But as far as what we did with paint analysis was to find that the paints that they used were the highest quality, and they both used the same high quality paints, which is one of the reasons they have lasted so long and been so intact in their quality.
Thanks for that information. And then I have a thank you, David and Rufus Porter Museum. Very interesting.
Well, thanks for listening.
Well, it's exciting to see what's coming.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited. Yeah, and what was it, 2011? So this is absolutely wonderful, and they are staggering walls. I mean, they're obvious. They're clearly the best examples of Jonathan Poor, and they're dated. And I don't know. I don't know exactly why, but for some reason he lavished as much as tension on those walls as any he did that I'm aware of. They're great examples.
I think one other point to mention is that where they're stored, the floor is heated. You can't just put them into a damp basement without the moisture damaging them. But because it had the heat under the floor, it's been a very dry storage area. That was one of your questions earlier from someone.
Right. Yeah. No, they seem to be doing very well there.
The Baldwin main house, he was from Baldwin, Jonathan Poor, right?
No, his doctor was.
Oh, okay.
He lived in Sebago. He grew up 10 miles away in Sebago.
Okay. And was it his doctor's house in which he painted these murals? Yes. I see.
The supposition was that his wife was quite ill at the time, and he painted these as a payment for the care that he gave his wife. She died not too long after.
His parents lived
gratitude, right?
His parents lived right up the road, and so yeah, there's still a poor house, a house belonging to a poor family just up the road, and that was his family's house.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, David, and thank you, everybody. This was a fascinating lecture and a great way to start off our virtual lecture series of 2023. Our next one is going to be on February 8th, same time, 7 p.m. And it's going to be a discussion by Earl Smith, who is the author of Downey's Genius. So that should be an interesting presentation as well. And if you have any questions or anything after this, you can go to our website, and you can also email info@rufusportermuseum.org. And I thank everybody for coming tonight.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, David.
Thank you.